Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live broadcast. Accelerate your throughput and lower operating costs with a new compact gas chromatograph. I'm Megan Manzano, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. We are pleased to bring you this webcast presented by LCGC and sponsored by Shimadzu. I would like to share a statement from our sponsor. Shimadzu has been at the forefront of GC innovation for over 60 years, creating customer-focused solutions built on a history of technological excellence. In addition to GC, Shimadzu's portfolio includes chromatography, mass spectrometry, informatics, molecular and atomic spectroscopy, and materials testing platforms, as well as consumables. We have a few important announcements before we begin. This webcast is designed to be interactive, and we encourage you to ask questions during the event. You can submit questions by typing them in the Q&A box, which can be found at the bottom of the video player. You can enlarge the slide window by clicking on the small icon in the bottom right corner of the media player. The slides will advance automatically during the event. If you have any technical problems viewing or hearing this presentation, please click on the question mark help widget in the top right of your presentation window. I would now like to introduce today's speakers, Alan Owens and John Peters. Alan Owens is the GC and GCMS product manager at Shimadzu Scientific Instruments. With a bachelor's degree in biology and chemistry and over a decade of hands-on experience, Alan has established himself as a distinguished authority in gas chromatography and gas chromatography mass spectrometry. John Peters is Senior Market Manager of Chemical and Fuel with Shimadzu Scientific Instruments. He applies his experience with spectroscopy and chromatography instrumentation, software, consumables, and sample handling technologies to create innovative marketing initiatives. Thank you both for joining us today, and please get us started.
Thank you for that kind introduction. So here we have the new product introduction of the GC-2050. And I understand there's some great new benefits to this that we're going to highlight in this webinar.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as you can already see that the Brevis GC-2050 is a lot smaller than our current GC-2030 model. But as we get further into the presentation, we'll discuss some features like built-in analytical intelligence, as well as some of its enhanced performance features.
So with three sections to this webinar, the first one being the compact design. The first thing I noticed when I approached this instrument is how small it is. What does this mean for our customers?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So one of the things that we really wanted to focus on with the Brevis GC-2050 was providing a compact GC to the market space. Space is obviously in high demand for several customers, not only including petrochemical, but environmental, pharmaceutical, and the list goes on. So space saving was of huge importance to us, and I think we really accomplished that with the Brevis GC-2050. So as you can see, we actually took off the LED touchscreen display, which brings the footprint width down to about 350 millimeters. So on your typical lab bench where you would actually have one GC system with computer, you could fit upwards of 2 to even 3 gas chromatographs on the same bench, ultimately, hopefully, maximizing your productivity.
Yeah, and so as we can see here, this is a new addition to an already comprehensive portfolio of GC instruments that Shimadzu has offered for over 60 years here. What else is exciting about this?
Well, John, we actually just released the Brevis GC-2050 in September of 2023. And we were lucky enough to display it at the Gulf Coast Conference show directly after in Galveston, Texas back in October. And actually the GC-2050 was selected as the new product of the year in the new product showcase there at GCC.
That's really exciting because by popular vote, that means that not just key opinion leaders and experts in the petrochemical and fuels industry were there voting on this, but also other vendors and other instrument manufacturers, etc. It indicates a lot of buzz for this new product launch.
So John, not only was the space-saving compact design a huge influence on this instrument, we also wanted to focus on the eco design as well. So as I mentioned, it's about 30% smaller, and what that means is greater cost savings in terms of electricity, gas consumption, and we also have some different features as well built in to the hardware side. So the materials itself are actually more insulating and we allow less heat to escape. So faster ramp times, but also the ability to kind of maintain thermal stability throughout the runs.
That's great. So cost savings and more throughput because of the high-speed temperature ramp, correct?
Absolutely. Yep.
All right, that's a lot of great detail about the footprint and some of the benefit to the customer in terms of increased speed of analysis and power consumption. What about the versatility? Are you able to run different accessories and consumables with this instrument?
Of course, yeah, that's a great question. So although you probably by now are thinking that the GC-2050 is pretty small, we actually have a ton of room on the actual instrument. So if I were to open up the column door, we can actually fit two 100-meter columns inside, as you can see here with our patented ClickTech technology for both the inlet and detector side. ClickTech is our toolless maintenance, which allows you to remove and install columns tool-free. Not only do we have our ClickTech technology on the column side of maintenance, we also allow any other types of columns within the oven, different manufacturers, nothing proprietary in that regards. And then, of course, our sample introduction, we have our AOC 30i and potentially even an HS20 dedicated headspace sampler, because on the top deck of the GC, we actually have the ability to do upwards of 2 SPLs and 2 detectors. So dual line analysis is possible even in this compact footprint.
Yeah, that's really versatile, and a lot of different accessory options for the front end and sample introduction. And the ability to be flexible with the consumables is really powerful, given that a lot of compact GCs are limited to proprietary consumables.
Absolutely. Yep.
Well, Alan, that's a great overview of the size and space savings that this instrument offers, as well as the versatility. What about some of the built-in intelligence for this instrument?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Brevis GC-2050 does have some AI features, and no, not artificial intelligence. We like to call it analytical intelligence at Shimadzu. And so one of the major features that we've implemented into the Brevis GC-2050 that was also part of the GC-2030 was our automatic column conditioning procedure. So if you're a customer that runs either really nasty samples or on a very frequent basis, this automatic column conditioning procedure will actually kick in between runs or after long batches to make sure that when you go to start your samples the next day, that column's exactly how you want it and how you left it before you started running samples at all. So we also have a built-in carrier gas switching function. So alternative carrier gases, of course, are extremely important nowadays. Helium is more and more expensive than ever. Having the ability to conserve as much helium as possible, but also run alternative carrier gases automatically, is something that we wanted to incorporate into our next unit. So with the Brevis GC-2050, we have the ability to automatically switch those carrier gases between hydrogen, nitrogen, or helium. And we also have the ability to automatically switch, say when your tank runs out of gas. So we have the ability to plumb in 2 lines of gas to make sure that gas is constantly being supplied to your Brevis GC-2050.
That's really going to avoid a lot of unnecessary downtime after running out of gas. That sounds like a huge benefit for customers. Well, that's a great overview of analytical intelligence from Shimadzu with this gas chromatography instrument. What about other sources of intelligence that are built into this instrument?
Of course, it's another great question, because not everything needs to rely necessarily on AI or anything like that. So we try to make this instrument also as simple as possible, as user-friendly as possible. And what you've noticed, probably as I mentioned before, there's no more LED touchscreen, but we do have 3 buttons. We have our physical start-stop key, as well as a maintenance button. So we wanted to kind of eliminate as much of the complications as possible and make that as easy for the user as possible. With the start and stop buttons, you can obviously control your analytical runs, but the biggest improvement that we've made with this maintenance is when you hit that maintenance button, it'll actually automatically put you into a maintenance mode. So it'll cool down the injection port, it'll turn off the flows. These lights will actually change colors to let you know when it's time to perform maintenance. You can perform your inlet maintenance, press the maintenance button once more, and all of the consumables, the gas, everything will reset and go right back to where it was before you started.
It sounds like it adds a lot of simplicity and reduces the training costs for new analysts in a lab, and adds a lot of benefit.
Yeah, I think, obviously we focused a lot on the physical aspect, but we really wanted to make the user connection as simple as possible so that new users or users of varying experience levels could sit down in front of the instrument and feel comfortable with it.
That's great. So, yeah, I'm used to seeing a touch screen or some display on the instrument itself.
Yeah, and I'm sure most people are used to seeing a touchscreen display. And of course, with our GC-2030 as well, we have the touchscreen display on our high-end model. But in terms of the maintaining that small footprint, we thought it was better to remove it. And what we've actually added is what's called a remote display. So with any type of Windows tablet, you can actually connect to up to 4 GCs at once and control the front panel, if there would be a front panel, from those GCs simultaneously. So we still have that access, and we've actually made it a little bit more portable as well in terms of with a tablet display. So for different labs, different users, this is not required by any means, but it's something optional that we thought would be a benefit to maybe some more experienced users or whoever wants to have the ability to quickly connect and diagnose certain instruments in the lab.
So that's actually increased levels of visibility over the workflow then.
Absolutely, and we've honestly received quite good feedback of the tablet display because there are customers that don't need it, don't want it, but there are certain lab managers who like the idea of having the ability to go quickly check and diagnose the instruments and also remove any type of human errors from people accidentally bumping into buttons, keypads, things on that in that regard. So
that's great.
So John, one thing that I forgot to mention was that the GC-2050 actually has a universal power supply. So depending on your lab's needs, whether it's 100, 115, up to 220 volts, this comes with a individual power supply, not the actual main unit. So again, increased flexibility. We've had customers in the past want to change labs, change power supplies, but then also increase, the performance of the GC. So for those looking for a higher throughput or higher speed oven ramping, we have the ability to maybe take a 115 volt and move it to a 220 volt just by swapping out the power supply. So in terms of flexibility as well, I think that's just another benefit to customers in their lab situation and how we can help them.
So what does this do for the supply chain in terms of lead time and the ability to deliver it? It sounds like it probably streamlines the production process to have one power supply.
Yeah, absolutely. So not only have we streamlined the one power supply, but all the additional SPL detectors, things like that will eventually go on this, also have that universal power supply. So we have the ability to kind of mainly focus on one unit and actually just change the power supply if need be. So that should hopefully also alleviate some of the power supply and supply chain issues that we've obviously been facing over the past couple of years.
Yeah, especially since COVID, that's been a big deal, trying to get instruments to the customers as quickly as possible.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
That's great.
So I know we talked about no LED display. How do you see your error messages? I know that happens a lot with gas chromatography and GC instruments. Sometimes you have a gas leak or sometimes you have an error message that you don't know what it means. Well, one of the things that we also incorporated into the Brevis GC-2050 was our 2D code navigation. And so what actually happens, whether you have a tablet for remote display or a computer with control software on there, it'll actually pop up a QR code for each individual error. And what's nice about that, John, is that it actually takes you directly to the troubleshooting pathway for that error. So if you have a leak, it'll actually take you to a video on how to troubleshoot that leak. If you have a power issue, it'll take you exactly where you need to go to troubleshoot that leak. So just kind of going back to what you had mentioned about, reducing training costs and things like that, having a solution that will actually take you right to where the problem is and how to fix it, I think is going to make customers very happy.
That's great. It really reduces a lot of downtime that's unnecessary and reduces the training costs as well. You have all the information in one place. That's great.
Yeah, and I think as well as, just making sure that, the downtime, like you mentioned, it's the utmost importance. We want to make sure that our customers don't spend too much time waiting for someone to get back to them to help, and they have the tools that they need directly on the instrument or in the software.
Indeed. Great overview, Alan. And yes, let's look at some applications now. Since GC is so common across industry, government, and academic sectors, and across a wide range of industries, I'd like to highlight the performance advantages of the Brevis GC-2050 by selecting a few representative applications. Let's highlight energy, fuels, and petrochemical, then environmental, pharmaceutical, food safety, and finally clinical. All of these industries require similar instrument performance with respect to precision, reproducibility, peak resolution, accuracy, and sensitivity. So let's look at some examples. So a little background and context about my area of focus. The chemical and energy market covers a wide range of techniques and analytes. most of which require GC testing of some kind, whether it's in petrochemical and fossil fuels, natural gas, sustainable biofuels, or even batteries. Shimadzu has many publications related to these industries, and here we see excerpts from the Hydrocarbon Processing Handbook, which details a host of analytical technologies. Specific to GC and hydrocarbons, this chart lists various methods for the analysis of natural gas, transformer oil gas, dissolved gas analysis, simulated distillation analysis, detailed hydrocarbon analysis, and analysis of oxygenates, sulfur, and aromatics. A variety of standards in system GC configurations cover these and other applications, including greenhouse gas analysis, refrigerants, trace moisture analysis with Shimadzu's barrier discharge ionization detector, analysis of refrigerants, impurities in chlorine gas, and even a system dedicated to gases that are produced in the deterioration of rechargeable lithium-ion batteries. So many configurations are available, and with over 65 years of success manufacturing and innovating GC technologies, Shimadzu offers models and accessories to meet any application need. To narrow it down a little, we've selected a few representative application notes to highlight the performance of the new Brevis GC-2050 gas chromatograph, and I'll go into some detail. The GC-2050 is a dual-column GC system with two splitless injection ports, which supports flame ionization, flame photometric, and electron capture detectors, as well as a host of accessories including the AOC30i and AOC 6000 Plus, as well as other autosamplers, the HS20 and X headspace analyzer, as well as the newly released GCMS QP2050 mass spectrometer. This array of options covers many of the petrochemical and fuels methods, and as I mentioned, for others that require a specialized detector or temperature programmable injector, etc., the GC2030 is available with a full array of options. So, the GC2050 with FID with splitless injectors covers many applications, and example methods are shown here. At the top we have ASTM 6729 and 6733, detailed hydrocarbon analysis of spark ignition engine fuels, the compositional analysis of crude oil feedstocks, fuels, and other petroleum products, detailed in the Handbook of Hydrocarbon Processing. Also shown is D2887A, one of the methods for determining boiling point distribution of petroleum mixtures via simulated distillation for fractions having a maximum boiling point of 538 degrees Celsius. This analysis helps refinery operations by creating a correlation between the boiling points of petroleum fractions and peak information on the GC chromatogram to determine the boiling point distribution of specific petroleum mixtures. Shown here on the bottom left are chromatograms for reference materials up to C44 and a reference oil sample. So it is easy to determine the ratio of carbon number fractions from the GC analysis. The GC analysis is much faster than physical fractional distillation, so it is an important real-time analysis tool to aid refinery operations. Additional details are highlighted in the handbook. Additionally, ASTM D5501 is an example GC FID method for bioethanol analysis, and on this slide we see examples of chromatograms of denatured fuel ethanol separated on 100 meter and 150 meter columns. The longer column provides better resolution, while the shorter column takes less time. The advantage of the GC2050 is the ability to use standard accessories in a compact, space-saving instrument. The benefit of the GC2050 to all of these applications include the increased productivity created in a limited space laboratory, the reduced power consumption and rapid temperature ramps, additional cost saving from using hydrogen and nitrogen, and built-in analytical intelligence with ease of use from automatic column conditioning and automatic remote operation, as detailed by Alan earlier. All of this translates to better performance by increasing throughput and productivity and decreasing costs and labor of any fuels analysis laboratory. So now let's look at some examples that highlight important performance indicators like chromatographic separation, resolution, detector sensitivity, precision, accuracy, repeatability, and linearity. Here we have application note 562 with data collected on the GC-2050. Relative to the environmental market, we've chosen a hot topic to highlight the performance of the GC-2050, total petroleum hydrocarbons, or TPH. Hydrocarbons in soil and drinking water have become an important public health concern. This analysis requires low detection limits and high speed of analysis for typical high-throughput environmental labs. So the main benefit of the GC-2050 for this application is speed of analysis and resulting increased productivity and throughput. This is possible on the GC-2050 because of a number of factors. The total mass and size of the oven is smaller, so it requires less heat energy. It's also constructed with high-performance materials and lower heat capacity, further reducing the energy consumption and time requirements. Finally, the 230-volt universal power supply contributes to this speed and has the added advantage of simplifying global supply chain and reducing lead times. So we see analytical conditions on the right with fast temperature ramps and good resulting separations. For this method, ISO 9377-2-2000 Determination of Hydrocarbon Oil Index Part 2 Solvent Extraction and Gas Chromatography requires separation of C10 from the extraction solvent and elution of C40 while keeping relative response ratios or peak area ratios of C40 to C20 at least 0.8. This ensures there is a similar peak response regardless of the analyte volatility or carbon number when making a split injection. In typical analyses, this requires lowering the initial temperature and increasing the thickness of the column, with a resulting analysis time of 20 to 30 minutes per sample. However, in this application note, we avoided having to lower the initial temperature, we used a thick film column, and we employed hydrogen carrier gas instead of helium. This setup cut the analysis time to 6 minutes. We also see here linearity of calibration curves, where 3 9s and an 8 were better, and precision of the calibration points are shown here to be excellent as well. The system passed all system performance tests, including C20 to C40 response ratio of over 0.94, which is well above the required 0.8, demonstrating good system performance with respect to boiling point discrimination across the range of analytes. C10 eluted at 0.4 minutes with good separation from the extraction solvent. And for repeatability and precision, here we see both light and heavier hydrocarbons, C20 and C40 RSDs are both less than 0.5%. The takeaway here again is the dual injector, dual column, space-saving design of the GC-2050 utilizes standard consumables and a high-speed temperature ramp, increases productivity of the lab space while exceeding performance requirements with greater operational efficiency and cost savings. Application notes 516 and 517 cover the U.S. Pharmacopoeia USP 467, testing of residual solvents in pharmaceutical products. This covers both water-soluble pharmaceutical products and water-insoluble products. The reason for this testing is that any residual solvents left over from the manufacturing process will pose health hazards and must be quantified for public safety purposes. The solvent is classified as class 1, 2, or 3 depending on toxicity and the threat to human health. Historically, GC analysis of these solvents has been conducted with helium carrier gas, but here again we can utilize either hydrogen or nitrogen. Operation with alternative carrier gas was verified using USP 1467, residual solvents, verification of compendial procedures, and validation of alternative procedures. We utilized the Shimadzu HS20NX headspace sampler. Among other things, the method requires we demonstrate chromatographic separation of compounds with a degree of separation specifically between acetonitrile and dichloromethane greater than 1.0. This peak separation is calculated according to USP guidelines using response times and peak height, peak width. On the chromatogram with the red arrow, we see black peaks labeled 2 and 3 correspond to acetonitrile and dichloromethane, which is easier to see the good separation on the zoomed-in image on the right. On the right, we see sample conditions were typical, except note that simultaneous injections of 2 columns was possible, and that either hydrogen or nitrogen carrier gas can be utilized. In the results, we see the degree of separation is twice the required value for all A and B runs with hydrogen and nitrogen, and for water-soluble and water-insoluble pharmaceutical products. Methods A and B differ by column temperature and ramp, split ratio, and column material, but the headspace conditions are the same. So again, excellent separation of complex mixtures demonstrated in this application note using the Brevis GC-2050 for residual solvent analysis, with added cost savings and increased productivity from the efficiency of space and alternative carrier gases. Here again, the major advantage of the GC-2050 is being able to use standard consumables in a compact GC and achieving the required degrees of separation and instrument performance. For the food and beverage market, let's look at application note 571, also for residual solvents, but this time with flexible food packaging material. Similarly, we utilized the HS20NX headspace sampler. Headspace analyzers can work with liquid or solid samples, but in this case, polypropylene, polyolefin, and polyethylene plastics were analyzed in sealed, pressurized vials using nitrogen gas and specific sampler conditions detailed here. The GC conditions shown on the right were typical GC FID analysis conditions with a unique 60-meter wax column and nitrogen carrier gas. 21 representative solvents were tested in accordance with guidelines from the Flexible Packaging Hygiene Association. The calibration data of 21 compound chromatograms are overlaid in the middle of this slide, showing good separation and a clean, low-noise baseline, with representative calibration curve of isopropanol in the middle bottom of the slide in concentrations from 1.96 to 19.6 milligrams per cubic meter, also showing excellent linearity above 3 nines. In this application, repeatability is also a key measure of success, and the headspace analyzer running solids, for which we see on the left RSDs of less than 2.2% for most analytes, which is excellent. And with headspace analysis, we have the added advantage of simplified sample preparation running solid samples. This application note demonstrates the variety of columns and consumables that are compatible with this compact GC-2050, utilizing the SH wax column in this example. Finally, let's look at application note 570 for the clinical market, covering blood alcohol content analysis. Here we use 2-column setup with different columns to verify accuracy and to study the difference between blood and water solvent matrices on peak response. Linearity of greater than 3 nines was achieved with both matrices, but you can see the slight difference in response due to matrix effects in the headspace file. So, the blood calibration curve is preferred, but either is possible and both produce accurate results. We see also that preconditioning the system with high concentrated sample and checking for carryover, as shown here, produced a stable system with good repeatability and linearity. Simultaneous dual-line analysis for ethanol with good separation of VOCs was possible using the SH-BAC +1 and +2 columns, with separation of 7 VOCs shown in the middle of the slide. Also critical to this method was the tertiary butyl alcohol internal standard versus ethanol in concentrations of 0, 10, 100, and 400 milligrams per deciliter. The conversion of 1% blood alcohol to milligrams per deciliter is 1000x, so that what's shown here, 400 milligrams per deciliter, is 0.4% BAC, and 20 milligrams per deciliter is 0.02 blood alcohol content. So this covers the range of real-world samples where the legal limit is often 0.08% BAC, and where the top end of the range of samples is somewhere above 0.3%. We see the accuracy of the system in the spike recovery data on the bottom left of the slide, notably improved in accuracy with higher concentrations of blood alcohol content, but still within the required 10% error margin in both matrices and even in the low end of concentrations. So it's important to quantitate well below the lower legal blood alcohol content limit and accurately determine results, and this is aided by the high sensitivity flame ionization detector. Key takeaways from this note are that 2 different types of columns run simultaneously make blood alcohol content analysis more productive, The low limits of quantitation are possible with sensitive flame ionization detector, and GC-2050 supports standard consumables and again increases productivity and lowers operating costs. So we've shown a variety of real-world applications, all of which are available on the Shimadzu website covering major industries. We highlighted the performance of the Brevis GC-2050 with respect to sensitivity, chromatographic separation and peak resolution, repeatability and precision, linearity, accuracy, and recoveries, and a host of ways that the dual-column, dual-injector space-saving design increases productivity and decreases operating costs and labor. So let's head back to the studio.
Thanks for that, John. We clearly have a ton of application data on the GC-2050, so I'm excited to share those application notes with the customers, and we're obviously continuously running more applications in all the different markets. But you can really see from the Japan side, they took a lot of time and interest in the customer's needs. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Specific industries that are very important with GC in particular.
Yeah. So it's always nice to see that. They always do a wonderful job with the hardware, but actually putting it into use and running applications, I think, is what customers really want to see. And I think it actually might be interesting as well if we pick the brain of one of our engineers from the Japan side of things. What do you think?
That's a great idea. Let's give them a call.
Fantastic.
So I'm excited to be here with Rio from the business unit of Shimadzu Corporation, the gas chromatography group. And that's the group that designed and implemented the product launch with the GC-2050. And as we've seen, we had a long history of Shimadzu GC technology innovations over the last 65 years, and this is accumulation of that. And so I'm excited to talk with the product development people. So Rio, as this was being developed, what were some of the thought processes and the criteria that you used to prioritize the development projects?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, John. This is Rio. So also thank you for the introduction and the question to the answer. Actually, we learned from customers that lab bench space is often limited, especially in contract testing lab or the chemical laboratories. So their throughput is often limited by space. So we wanted to maximize the productivity and throughput by shortening the instrument width. This initiative has recently been used across many Shimadzu products. For example, like the TOC1000E inline high purity water analyzer, also the Maudi Mini 1, etc. But we also wanted to make it easier to use and more productive for typical applications, decreasing the cost of operation and increasing productivity and throughput are the key customer needs.
Yeah, that's great. A lot of really good features here that are going to benefit our customers, and that touch on some pain points that you mentioned: the productivity, the bench space, helium being very difficult in the supply chain right now, and also maintenance costs, overall cost of operations. So when you were developing this, how did you gather the information from customers? What were some of the tools that you used to get the voice of customer?
Yeah. So during the development, this was an intensive review of customer experience conducted over a period of time across global markets and applications. Those information came from various sources such as textbook codes and industry market trend data, etc. But the direct customer feedback was the key to establishing customer needs and prioritizing project for this development. These days, we see a trend towards even greater automation, less downtime, size reduction, and cost of operations.
That's great. And I really like this approach that the business unit has to product development and looking at long-term trends and industry trends over the long period of time, and positioning ourselves to be in front of those instead of short-term, things that might not be necessary in 5 years, but we're looking for the long-term benefit for customers here. What else is new from the business unit?
Yeah, so we just launched QP 2050, GCMS QP 2050, which is the brand new single quad mass spec that has the features like minimum maintenance design for the new ion source and long life filament, 1 minute ion source exchange, the highest scan speed, etc. So those are the new QP 2050 can be added to the existing Nexus DC-2030 and Brevis DC-2050. So our new mass spec gives customers more flexible and scalable options. That's our new product too.
That's really exciting to see a modular design mass spec that's compatible both with the new compact GC-2050 and with the existing 2030. So I see it's released on the Japanese website and maybe some other regions. What about the Americas, Alan? When is this going to be available for our customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So by the time people are seeing this conversation that we're having on Teams right now, the new GCMS QP 2050 will be launched in SSI. The launch date officially is going to be January 9th. And we're extremely excited about bringing this product to the customers just because of the points that Rio mentioned, including the minimum maintenance, the expanded flexibilities and capabilities. This is the first time that Shimadzu has been able to offer a detector-only option. So we're super excited to provide existing customers a potential upgrade pathway, but then also give customers with new purchases the flexibility to choose between what GC front end works best for them. So really looking forward to it. And it's nice to have two products, both the GC 2050 and the QP 2050 launched around the same time. It creates a lot of buzz, and I think the customers are really going to like what they see.
That's excellent. Really exciting stuff. So thank you guys for speaking with me, and have a great evening.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Thanks, Rio. Good to see you as always.
Thank you.
Wow, that was really great of our colleague from Japan to join us for that call. I think it was truly insightful for what they go through looking at the innovation and development of new instruments. So at this point in time, I just want to thank everyone for joining us. John, thank you for your time and all of the things that you've done for this. We appreciate you guys tuning in for our launch of the Brevis GC-2050. We hope you've enjoyed your time. We hope we've answered all your questions, but you're in luck. We actually have some time for questions now, and with that, we can pass it back to the moderator.
All right. Thank you both for such a fantastic presentation. Before we get started on the question and answer session, I would like to remind our audience how to submit questions. You can submit questions by typing them in the Q&A box, which can be found directly below the video player. So the first question we have here from our audience says, do you have an auto sampler for thermal desorption, such as the 10x air sampling tubes TGGCMS?
Yes, absolutely. So that's a great question. So we currently have Shimadzu dedicated auto sampler or sampler introduction techniques. The ones compatible with GC 2050 as of right now on the Shimadzu side would be our AOC 30i and AOC 20i, the liquid auto samplers. We also have our headspace sampler, the HS 20NX, which works with the Brevis GC 2050. In terms of third-party samplers, like the Marks thermal desorption sampler, we do have the ability to add those existing sample configurations to our Brevis GC 2050. So they are compatible. Yes, that's correct.
Wonderful. Thank you. The next question here from our audience says, is the GC 2050 a suitable front end for mass spectrometry?
Yes, absolutely. I believe we touched on it a little bit in the presentation, but as of right now, as a couple of weeks ago, our brand new single quad, the GCMS QP 2050, was launched in the US by SSI. And that is the first ever detector-only option provided by Shimadzu. So this single quad mass spectrometer can be added to a Brevis GC 2050. It can also be upgraded or added to our existing Shimadzu GC 2030s for those customers who currently have GCs that are looking to expand into mass spectrometry as well.
Wonderful. We have another question here about compatibility, which is asking, is it compatible with all Shimadzu GC detectors?
That's a great question. So I believe we touched on this in the presentation as well. Currently, the available detectors for the Brevis GC 2050 are the FID, the ECD, and the FPD. Our other existing models like the SCD, the BID, and the TCD, all of those are coming very soon. So we are looking at targeting the launch of or the addition of those detectors in the springtime of this year. So April through June is when we will expect to see detectors like the SCD, the TCD, and the BID. Any of the additional detectors, those are going to be added to the GC-2050 portfolio very soon.
Great, thank you. Our next question here says, in the case of running toxic compounds, does the exhaust have an option to add C or other filters so gas does not go into the room, or would this perturb the flow controls due to the back pressure?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. So currently all Shimadzu GCs, not only the GC-2050, but the GC-2030 have an inline split filter. This split filter is a consumable that can be changed by customers. It's very easy to access on the backside of the instrument, and it's a toolless change as well. So we do treat that as a consumable for those customers looking to run some toxic samples. But not only do we have built-in split filters in line, but we also have attachment kits for the purge and the split vent. We do have attachment kits that can actually be connected to the out portion of those flow controllers to route those to the necessary hood or ventilation, depending on lab safety concerns. So we do have those pre-made kits that got to also be attached for those running toxic samples.
Great, thank you. The next question we have says, is the GC-2050 using the same column as the other one, or is there a separate column made for it?
Yes, absolutely. So the Brevis GC-2050, along with the GC-2030, all accept industry standard columns across the board. So whether that's ResTech, Sapelco, or what other vendor of column, traditional capillary columns, as long as they are the appropriate length, ID, phase, but there are no manufacturer-specific columns that the GC-2050 can't work with. So that is nice to have that flexibility for those customers that have existing columns, applications that they're already used to. Typically, any capillary column can be installed on the Brevis GC-2050.
Great, thank you. We have another question that says, what is the age difference between CG-2030 to 2050?
Yes, absolutely. So obviously the Brevis GC-2050 was launched in October of last year of 2023. The GC-2030 was launched out in, I think, 2016, 2017. And so there's about a 6 to 7 year age gap between the two. The Nexus GC-2030 is still our high-end model that has the larger capacity for additional flow zones, detectors, heater zones, as compared to the GC-2050. But there's about a 6 year age gap between the two instruments.
Great, thank you. The next question here says, can you put a PID in series with an ECD on this 2050 GC, as I have on my 2010 plus GC?
Yes. So in regards to this, the answer is not yet. So this is something that we're currently working on. I would expect us to have a solution for this later this year or early next year. But this is something that I believe we're working towards. We don't have a current solution for yet, but it should be made available in the future, later this year or early next year.
Great, thank you. We have another question here that says, is there a hydrogen sensor option available with the GC-2050?
Yes. So out of the box, absolutely. We wanted to make sure that the hydrogen sensor was one of the first things that was made available, because alternative carrier gases is extremely important nowadays with customers dealing with the rising prices in helium. For that added level of comfort and security, yes, the hydrogen sensor that works on the GC-2030 is the exact same that works on the GC-2050. That can absolutely be installed on the Brevis GC-2050.
Great. And to our next question here, which says, is it possible to work with packed columns?
Yes, so that's a great question as well. So currently the Brevis GC-2050 only works with capillary columns or certain plot columns. But in terms of packed columns, the answer is no, not yet. That will also be coming later this year as we continue to expand the capabilities of the Brevis GC-2050.
Great. What about third-party detectors such as PFPD?
So in short, yes. In theory, yes, they should be able to attached to the Brevis GC-2050. If there are any current detectors that currently that are third party that are associated with the Nexus GC-2030, they are also potentially compatible with the Brevis GC-2050.
Great. We have a lot of people very interested in this, and more questions keep coming in. The next one we have here says, how many detectors can be simultaneously installed in the new GC-2050?
So currently the Brevis GC-2050 has the ability to install 3 detectors. So although the oven size is quite small, we do have the temperature and the flow zones for 2 inlets and 3 detectors. Now, I do want to put a little asterisk on that because it depends on the detector itself. For the Shimadzu TCD, that typically takes up 2 detector spots. So in those configurations, you may have 1 TCD and 1 FID, but we do have available locations for upwards of 3 detectors.
Okay, great. And next one here is the Brevis GC suitable for Class 1 residual solvent analysis?
Yes, absolutely. So from a hardware perspective, the Brevis GC-2050 is actually perfect for Class 1 residual solvent analysis, depending on what the system configuration is, or the analytes required, with sample introduction techniques, but the hardware is absolutely suitable for Class 1 residual solvent analysis. On top of that, our lab solution software is 21 CFR compliant as well. So we've done the necessary steps on the software side as well to make sure that everything is compliant in that regards as well.
Okay, great. I have a question about charging here, which asking, is the software charged in the tablet?
So I think I understand that question in terms of, is the software installable onto the tablet? So short answer is yes, we can install the software on the tablet. We typically provide a PC for every instrument with our operating software because it has the necessary memory space and processor for data acquisition and data analysis. We typically don't recommend the tablet for total control of the instrument. We prefer to use the tablet for the remote display app, which actually gives you kind of a quick glance look at the Brevis GC-2050 current status conditions. You can do and run inlet maintenance, things like that from the tablet. And we typically don't recommend using total software control with the tablet, but this can be potentially installed onto a tablet.
Great, thank you. Next question here is, are the consumables of GC-2030 compatible with 2050?
That's a great question. Yes, so absolutely. So any of the consumables that were used from the GC-2030 are compatible with the Brevis GC-2050. So your inlet liners, your Recepta, any of the auto sampler consumables, all of that is cross-compatible between the 2 instruments.
Great, thank you. Our next one here says, has 2050 been applied to at-clinic breath analysis as a diagnostic?
So the 2050 has not yet been applied for that specific application. I believe if there was a customer looking to do that, we'd be more than happy to reach out and help with some method development on that regards. Considering the GC-2050 has only been launched or released to the public since October of last year, that is one application space that we haven't kind of delved into yet. But if there are specific application requirements, feel free to reach out or post your question in the chat, and we'll be more than happy to reach out and assist.
Fantastic, thank you. Next question here. Can you only install an SPL injector, or any other injectors can be installed as well?
So that's a great question. Yeah. So currently, the only injectors available are the SPL, the splitless inlet. The OCI, like on-column injection, or PTV is Shimadzu's programmable temperature inlet. Those will be accommodated or capable or accessible with the GC-2050 coming in April, late springtime this year.
Fantastic. Okay, next question here for you. If we have 3 detectors, can we configure 3 lines in the new version of the software?
So currently, no. So we still can only configure 2 analytical lines within the software. That is an improvement that we're pushing pretty hard on Shimadzu's side of things. We're hoping to implement that soon. I don't have a date for anyone yet, but currently the only configurable solution is 2 analytical lines with 2 detectors. Now, if we have some detectors in series, then potentially we can increase that. But for 3 separate lines or 3 separate detectors, we would need to only control 2 at a time.
Perfect. Okay, next question. Can you use cryo focusing to trace analysis, including gases?
Absolutely. So it depends on what type of cryofocusing you're looking to do. If you're looking for LN2, carbon dioxide, things like that, we do have specific modules that can be installed to perform cryo focusing on the head of the column. Some of our sample introduction techniques also have built-in Peltier cooling as well, so not necessarily cryo focusing. It all depends on the temperatures that you want to go down to and the analytes that you're interested in cryo focusing. But we do have some available options to potentially assist with that.
Great. Okay, next question is, does the tablet have to be used on site, or is it possible to use it via remote control, like if you're traveling or you have a home office set up?
So currently the tablet is tested to connect directly to the instrument. So interfacing directly with the instrument with a USB or Ethernet connection. We are playing around and testing options of doing remote support. We have other software as well already released, like Lab Solutions CS or Client Server, that allows you to build a network of instruments and computers, which will give you more direct access to not only just that instrument, but more instruments from a remote location.
Great. Next question. Has 2050 been set up for trace analysis of gases, including for toxic semiconductor gases analysis like arsine or phosphine?
So that's a good question, and we are currently working on an application of that in that regards as we speak. The battery analysis, the battery market, that's a huge focus of ours, not only on the GC side of things, but also the GCMS side of things. So be on the lookout for some application notes regarding those specific compounds and area of interest soon.
Okay, next question is it already available instruments in SSI?
Absolutely, yes. So the GC-2050 was launched in October. That's available in SSI, and it is also now available for all distributors of SSI as well. So Latin America, South America, Mexico, the Brevis GC-2050 is available as well.
All right. Well, with that, I think we will wrap up today's event, but this one has been extremely full of audience participation. So thank you so much to our audience. And I would love to thank both Alan and John, and Alan for taking on those questions, because there's a lot. But I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Shimadzu, for making today's educational webcast possible. We would like to ask everyone in the audience to participate in a brief survey. This survey will appear on your screen after today's presentation has ended. You will receive an email alerting you when this webcast will be available for replay, and we invite you to forward that announcement to your colleagues who may have missed today's live event. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and we'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.